Good morning, everyone. This is March 23rd, and today we're going to talk about supplier diversity and how that really becomes a competitive strategy for a lot of companies today. So, this is our Dynamic Dialog webinars. We do them the second and the fourth Tuesday of every month. We do a short presentation and then open it up for questions, comments, whatever. Keep it to under an hour. And the link that you have is good for now through March. And there'll be a new link in April, but I'll get that sent out to everyone. And as you know, I send out the link the day of the webinar, so you won't miss a thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about small businesses today. And in general, a small business is defined by the U.S. Small Business Administration, often called the SBA, as having less than 500 employees and revenues under $7.5 million. So that's the basic, but that varies a lot. And as a small business person, those numbers are numbers that I only dream about. These are independently owned businesses, independently owned and operated, and not dominant in any field of operation. To qualify, they have to be that. There are also for-profit businesses located in the U.S. They have to pay taxes in the U.S. or use American products, materials, and or labor and meet the size and revenue standards. So there are some pretty interesting things there that they have to have. But there's a lot of restrictions too. And if you're a grape vineyard, a tree nut farm, or a dairy cattle and milk production company, you're limited to only $1 million in annual revenue. And water supply and irrigation system companies have a revenue cap at $30 million and can still be called a small business. Single family home builders have a cap of $39.5 million for annual revenue. So it varies quite a bit. Solar and wind electric power generation companies, they're limited to 250 employees, but breweries or chocolate manufacturers can employ up to 1,250 people and still be considered a small business. So there's a lot of different things that qualify businesses to be small businesses. The specifics can vary quite a bit, but being a small business today has a lot of advantages, but it also has a lot of challenges. Federal, state, and local governments all have programs aimed to incorporate small businesses into their supply pool. And that means defense contractors and subcontractors. And they, for a long time, have had small business programs to support these kinds of goals. But today, more than ever, non-defense corporations and private businesses have added diversity and inclusion to their corporate goals, their values, and now those include supplier diversity programs as well. So if you can qualify, I think it's a great thing to get a certification for one of those businesses, because there's a lot of different things to do with that certification. One, it gives you a little bit of credibility. If you have a certificate or a certificate number, that can open doors to more business. And if you're looking for business growth, and really today aren't all businesses looking for growth, you should look for customers among companies with supplier diversity programs. So if you're a small business, that's a great place to target your next customers. You want to keep in mind that most government supplier selections price for most government supplier selections, price is the primary factor. And small businesses get large discounts by comparison. So what they do, if they get two bids, one from the large company, they use their quoted bid. And if they get a bid from a small company, they discount that in comparison to see who gets the award. And the city of Los Angeles has a range of 8 to about 10% that they can reduce the bid from the small business to compare to the large business. So this enables them to award a lot of business to small businesses when they're comparing that. And that can be a significant win factor for a lot of businesses in that area. So let's look at some of this key information here. The SBA is a branch of the U.S. government. It was established in 1953 And today it's headed, as of last Wednesday, by a woman named Isabella Casillas Guzman. She's from California. It's a cabinet level position and it's dedicated to small businesses providing counseling, capital, and contracting expertise. So, to aid in the government contracting, you need to register with SAM, which is the System for Award Management. It's a database that agencies use to find a lot of different contractors. Most of these require the same kind of information that they need, the legal name, the headquarters for your business. They need to know where you're doing business, if you have a DBA, doing business as, or anything. They want to know a physical address, your mailing address, phone numbers, contact information, number of employees. They want 3 years of tax returns to be filed. And there's a lot of different information that they want. So these are some of the main kinds of organizations. So I talked about the small business, which is actually that cabinet level position. The System for Award Management, SAM, is where you need to get registered. In order to do that, you typically need a DUNS number, which is a Dun and Bradstreet number, which is free to get. So it's free to register for SAM. It's free to register for your DUNS number. SBA has a mentor protege program. So if you do need some help as a small business, you can get that help from a number of different customers. Another thing you'll need is the NAICS, the industry classification system. They have this real complicated system where you go in and say what you actually do, and they kind of walk you through and give you some codes. And you can have a few more codes than just one on your applications. There's a National Minority Supplier Diversity Council, which is also a big source of information. They help register different businesses and they can link you up with businesses if you're a customer. And if you're a small business, they can get you into some different resources to help you out. There's the Women's Business Enterprise National Council. There's a National Minority Supplier Development Council. There's a National Gay and Lesbian or Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. There's a lot of different things. And then finally, there's the USBLN, the US Business Leaders Network. So there's all of these kinds of things that help you do business as a small business, but they also help you as a customer looking for small businesses to identify potential businesses that would fit your needs. And this is very important because many companies nowadays are adding supplier diversity and supplier inclusion to their other corporate social responsibility initiatives. They have these across the board for employees, but now they're expanding it quite a bit to small businesses as well. So here's some different classifications. So there's a woman-owned small business, there's an economically disadvantaged woman-owned business, veteran-owned small business, disabled veterans owned small business, and hub zones. These are just a few of these, and I have a few more that I'm going to show you. But these businesses have the mandate that you have 51% of the business owned by one or more of these socially and economically disadvantaged people who manage and operate the business. Owners have to meet the size standards, and they have principals whose net worth is less than $750,000, excluding the value of the business and the value of your personal home. So to be disadvantaged, you have to meet these criteria as well as just registering. So there's different things that you have to go through to prove that ownership. And then again, there's the historically Black colleges and universities, which is another class that you can have. So here's some of these organizations, and some of these I just went through, and you can see that they have a couple of different names. So there's Black owned, and then there's African American organizations. There's all of these different types of organizations that qualify. And if you're going to start one of these programs to have supplier diversity, you want to look at your supply base and see who is already in these categories. Which of my suppliers meet these criteria? Do I have women-owned businesses? Do I have disabled veteran-owned businesses? How are my businesses, my suppliers, how are their businesses set up? the first thing you can do is ask them if they have any certifications and ask for copies of those certifications or documents that say that they have been approved. It used to be a lot of this was self-certification. Now they've gone away from the self-certification, and there's a lot of different organizations that will help small businesses get certified. They charge for that, but most of these registrations are free if you choose to do it yourself, with maybe a small fee for submitting all the paperwork. Myself, I'm a woman owned business and I belong to the National Women's Business Enterprise. So I have that certification, and I think it cost me around $200 to get that certification after I did all of the paperwork. There are other organizations that will do that. So if you have suppliers who are eligible for these, you can ask them to investigate that and see what they need to do to qualify, because there are any number of organizations for small fees that will help you get registered. But like I say, the SAM is free, the Dun and Bradstreet is free, and many of these certifications are free or almost free with small nominal annual charges to get the paperwork and to process that. So why is this really important? It's important for a lot of different reasons. I've got some information from a 2018 report that talks about Small Business Association estimating 8 million minority owned businesses in 2018. That was their full estimate. That's the latest data that I could find from the SBA. It usually takes a year or two to process all of these. But there's the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council has reported that these minority business enterprises generate $400 billion in economic output. And that $400 billion leads to 2.2 million jobs and $49 billion in annual revenue for local, state, and federal taxes. So these businesses are really a big part of the economy, and making sure that these businesses stay sound, stay viable is very important to our overall economy. Small businesses typically, according to the Hackett Group in a 2018 study they did, they spend less to buy things than larger companies, which makes sense. Typically, small businesses don't have a lot of infrastructure in their procurement departments. They may have only a buyer or two. They don't necessarily have a manager dedicated to that. They don't have a lot of extra people. So they can spend up to 20% less just on the buying processes. So that means they have less overhead. Less overhead gets multiplied. As you know, you take the base piece, you add the overhead, you add the profit on top of that. And so companies that are small can really compete very competitively with larger companies in a lot of areas. They also found that minority businesses are growing at 34% at an annual rate. Now, that doesn't include 2020, which probably kicked a lot of things in the teeth. But up until that point, they were growing at 34% annually, which was twice as fast as the national average. So it's an area where there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of talent in small businesses, and especially in minority businesses. Some studies are showing that diversity programs can have a return on the investment of well over 100%. They have one study that shows diversity programs have up to about 133% return on whatever investment you put into that. So if you have a small organization and you think that you can't afford a supplier diversity program, you might want to think about that again, because most of these programs more than pay for themselves. And remember that diverse suppliers are not only suppliers, but they're consumers. And 82% of people who are small businesses themselves or diverse suppliers indicate that they prefer to buy from diverse businesses. So you're not only setting up suppliers, but you're setting up potential customers. So if your products are offered on the open market, think about that. Diverse suppliers and small business suppliers tend to support other organizations that support small and diverse businesses. So there's increasing data and information that says that the surveys indicate that people really consider this when they make their purchases. Um, and from 2017, um, it said that only 19% of organizations are actually measuring the economic impact of diversity programs. So there's a lot more potential in this area because only 19% are actually measuring what they get out of these programs. So now we're starting to see more and more data since 2017 because companies are looking more at what is the return, what is the value of this. And it's pretty overwhelming evidence that says this is a good thing to do for your business. Now, small businesses have a lot of challenge, and there are a lot of things that they can't do as well or as quickly, but they do have small staff, which is a difficult thing if you're a small business, but that small staff can really respond much more quickly oftentimes than bigger companies that you might have in your supply pool. They don't do a lot of Small businesses don't do a lot of marketing or advertising because they don't have the budget for that. So that's a detriment to the small business. But as a customer managing a small business, you know they're going to pay attention to your business because they want to hang on to that. They don't have big budgets to go advertise and look to expand their customer base 100 times over during the year. So they want to really nurture the customers they have, build their business with those customers, and build their business alongside those customers. There are a lot of rapid changes in technology, and that kicks the teeth out of all businesses. But small businesses are especially challenged sometimes by the technology changes just because of the investments required. They don't often have a lot of money to put new MRP, ERP systems in place. And if they do get one in place, and it's not usually a very sophisticated one, the changes and the updates and the modifications, customization, they don't have a lot of money for that. So the technology changes can be a little bit difficult for them to manage. But as a customer, it's easy to help a small business manage through those things. Cash flow is an area where small businesses are challenged. So, as a customer, if there's things that you can do with your small business to give them prepayments, to help them buy the raw materials that they need, give them cash flow help so they can buy the materials and then they can give you the product that you need in a timely fashion. This can also help them reduce their lead time because if you pay in advance for the materials, then they should have the materials on hand and be able to make you what you need, and that should give them more agility and more flexibility in responding to your demand variability as well. Small companies have had a lot of trouble attracting talent and then developing and retaining that talent. So I know a small number of small businesses, and I have a few clients that have really attracted and just kind of lucked into very talented employees. They're sometimes able to develop them, sometimes not as much as they would like to in investing in things like additional education, certifications, workshops, webinars. But sometimes I've seen small businesses do better than large businesses who recently have really stopped making training budgets available. So many of the large businesses I know of have reduced their training budgets, their development budgets, and so they're working with what they have. So that development is an opportunity as well as a challenge. And then retention is a problem for any company, large or small. Good people, if they don't feel like they're getting rewarded, if they don't feel like they're getting promoted quickly enough, then they will find greener pastures or what seems to be greener pastures. So this is an area that both large and small businesses have to retain. But it's as a customer managing small businesses, this is an area where you can really work with your suppliers to retain that talent, and those relationships between small businesses and larger businesses can be a real incentive for employees as well. Forecasting and demand planning, everyone struggles with this. This is always a challenge, but small businesses struggle more because they don't have the tools and the technologies that help them do that. So they rely on their customers a lot. as a customer, you can keep a small business by making sure that you meet with them regularly or send them forecast information. Help them help you because they don't have a lot of that ability. So, the more you can help them use your tools that are available to do forecasting and demand planning, the better supplier they're going to be for you. If you're a small business owner or like I am, or if you've been a senior manager, your work life balance usually struggles. It's hard to keep things going, and it's hard to sometimes leave the work behind. But that also means that from a small business, you're going to be able to reach the small business people that you need all the time because they rarely turn off their phones. So if you have a business that needs quick response, agility, flexibility, small businesses can offer a lot more of that than larger businesses do. The pandemic has been a challenge for everybody. The health issues, the protocols, how we're coming back to work, working from home, not working from home, getting back into the office, all this is going to be there. So small businesses have been hit with this same challenges, and yet they don't always have the same resources to respond. So as a customer, retaining your small businesses in your portfolio is very, very important. So you need to look at this and not take that for granted. I want you to understand the federal government goals. So this is what large government organizations have. Again, this SBA was established in 1953. Um, some of the things that you have to have now are for goals if you're going to be a federal government contractor or a subcontractor, because many of these get rolled down from the federal government to their prime to all of their sub-tier suppliers. So for those of you in this Los Angeles area that may work for Lockheed or Boeing or Raytheon or Northrop, so there are federal goals that they have. And their goals are to give 23% of prime contracts for small businesses. They want 23% of their prime contracts going to small businesses, which is difficult to do when you have some of these contracts that go like to Raytheon. A contract that Raytheon typically gets is not going to a small business, but they're going to hire a lot of small businesses to do that. So the prime contract might not be the right fit. It might be the tier one, tier two, even tier three uh, subcontractors, because companies now roll all this up. They look at their tier one spend and they say, how much of that is with tier one, small disadvantaged businesses? And then they say, okay, how much of yours is that? And they accumulate this, they aggregate this to try to meet some of these goals. So they're looking for small businesses in general. They're looking for women-owned businesses, a 5% goal. Small disadvantaged businesses, 5% goal. 3% going to hub zones. So that's an important area, an important distinction. 3% going to service disabled vets, which is another targeted area, especially government contracting and defense areas. They really want to try to get the service disabled vets in there in the mix. There's other agencies, states, and local governments. Their goals vary, but they're very similar to this. And they're looking typically at the 5 to 10% range for very many of these categories. And one thing to keep in mind is that a business can have more than one category designation. So you can have a business that's a small business. They can be a small woman-owned business. If that woman is Hispanic or African American, then it's a small minority owned business. If you have someone who's a veteran, if that woman happens to be a veteran of the United States, say Marines, then that adds another thing in. So you don't get to multiply that for every category that your supplier fits in, but you do get to apply that how you see fit. So if you're trying to meet a goal of 5% and you have women-owned businesses who are also disadvantaged businesses or service disabled, you can put that money where it fits your need in order to meet these goals. So you have to know these different categories and you have to know your suppliers. I've said many times in these dynamic dialogue webinars that it's very important to know your suppliers, to do your homework and understand who's in your supply base. So know your goals, know the suppliers that fit, and be able to report on that. If you aren't a government contractor, but you would still like to set your own goals, you can use these kinds of goals as references to start and say, where am I? Once you get your baseline set and understand what you have and who's who in your supply base, then you can set your own goals. If you can exceed these government goals, then that's awesome. And that's a great thing for you to advertise and let your customers know, and let your investors know, and let your other suppliers know that this is what we're doing. So this is a very good way to inc- continue to attract business, attract customers to your business. There is a DSBS. It's a dynamic small business search, and you can look for businesses that are registered through these different agencies. You can look for those in your area. You can look for those by industry. You can look for those by name, but you can find a lot of small businesses in case you're looking and don't see any popping up. This is a great resource for you to use because it actually gives you a listing of suppliers that are registered small or disadvantaged, and they are in those categories that you're trying to source. So there are a lot of benefits of supplier diversity. One, it really does give you a lower cost of operations. Again, smaller businesses typically have lower overheads and lower um, costs of doing business because they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the hierarchy, they don't have as many employees in general, so they don't have as many support employees, so they can have a lower cost of operation. So you can get a better price from small businesses in many instances. Working with small businesses gives you new market and new customer access. Again, many small disadvantaged businesses are looking for uh, customers. When they spend their money, that's where they want to spend it, and when they hire suppliers, that's where they want to get it. So you get both a new market and you get customer access when you use small businesses and if you have a supplier diversity program. There are a lot of events that showcase small businesses, and you can do a lot of networking there. You can go to those. They used to be in person. Nowadays, I think they're virtual, but they should go back in person, or if not, they're going to be even bigger and broader as a virtual organization. And I'm seeing a lot of these kinds of events that before the pandemic had always been in person and you always had to be there. Now they're saying, you know what, we're going to do a hybrid. A hybrid is going to allow us to have some people here, but it's going to also allow us to have other people virtually. And since we're all used to this virtual model now, it's going to allow these events to be bigger and better. And you're going to get more resources out of attending one of those, whether you intend it in person or virtually. So there's a lot of events that showcase small businesses, and I would look for many more of those in the next couple of years. Again, if your corporation is doing this, then your division needs to do this. And if not, this is a good thing to do on your own if you're a procurement or you're a supply chain manager or executive. This is an area where employees really embrace working with small and diverse businesses, and the rest of the employees feel this is a big motivator, and it's also a reflection of management's value of diversity and inclusion. So if you have had any issues in your company, or you feel like you could use an infusion of diversity and inclusion to meet some goals, or just to keep your morale high in your organization, the supplier diversity programs are a great way to do that. You get better connections with your customers, with your partners. Again, marketing people will love to know that you've started a supplier diversity program. This now is becoming more and more visible to outside stakeholders, to outside customers and potential customers, and to new markets that you might not have been able to penetrate before. So this is a really good tool to work with your marketing department to let them know you have a supplier diversity program and how you're doing with that. How much progress are you making? It's very important that you set your baseline as to where you are, set your goals, and then track your progress against that. month over month, at least quarter over quarter. Week to week is probably too often, but every month it's a good check in to say how much progress am I making? Have I identified new sources? And have we actually brought on new small and diverse businesses? These small and diverse businesses are a great way to help reduce your supply chain risk. If you have more competition in there, if you have dual sourcing, even with smaller volumes, because small businesses don't require the large volumes to actually take on some of your business. So that gives you a risk mitigation strategy to dual source something that you thought maybe you didn't have enough volume to dual source, but come to find out you can do that with a small business and a larger business. It gives suppliers a lot of room to help you innovate and do things differently, because small businesses have to be more flexible, more streamlined, more agile and versatile. They can help you do that as a business as well. So they can promote that innovation because they've had to do that to survive. Uh, the flexibility, the efficiency, sometimes the location is a huge help to companies who can do things with small businesses that are local versus trying to do something with a business in another country or clear across the country. So you can make them part of your flexibility and efficiency goals as well. Customers, again, customers are demanding that. Customer corporations and companies are, but individual customers too. When you spend the money, the hard-earned money that you have, you want to spend it with companies who have the same values and who are promoting the things that you promote in your own life, in your own household, and in the things that you do outside of work. So supplier diversity is seen as a huge help in those areas. Small business highly correlates to the growth of the national economy. When small businesses grow, it's been shown time and time again in multiple studies, small business growth feeds that, goes along with the growth of the national economy. And when small businesses are not growing or shrinking, then the national economy does the same thing. I'm not sure which is the chicken and which is the egg, but they are highly correlated. And so to continue to fuel national economic growth, we want to use more and more small businesses. So GM started what is really regarded as one of, if not the first, supplier diversity program way back in 1968 as a result of some of the unrest in the Detroit area where a lot of the automakers were located. And most American auto manufacturers followed suit very quickly after that. But GM was really the groundbreaker that said, we're going to do this. And that helped them stay in their number one market position for many years. IBM started a program about the same time. So they were pretty much the front runners for large corporations to say, we are looking for suppliers with diversity. So whether they're small, and this was before a lot of um, these names and these acronyms existed. They were just looking for different kinds of suppliers and smaller suppliers that could help what they needed, that were primarily in the local area, again, because of um, the culture and the culture wars that were going on in the 60s. So it's been very successful for them, and they continue to do that. UPS is on board with that. UPS now spends $2.6 billion annually, and they do that with 6,000 small and diverse suppliers with goals to increase year over year. And when you think of UPS, you think of these fleet of trucks and all of this delivery. You do not think of them as a company that would espouse a big supplier diversity program, but they have $2.6 billion in spend with over 6,000 businesses in the United States, and they're increasing that every year. Coca-Cola is another company, again, big behemoth company. You would think that they have their tried and true suppliers and they don't need a lot of that. They actually spend over $800 billion annually on diverse suppliers. And they had a goal to reach $1 billion, um, I'm sorry, 800 million annually on diverse suppliers. And they had a goal to reach $1 billion in 2020. Because of the pandemic, I'm not sure that they reached that or not. They haven't published that, but that was their goal by the end of 2020 to have that $1 billion spend with diverse suppliers from the 800 million that they had. Target is another big company, 1.4 billion on first tier diverse suppliers. So this is an area where Target, and you look at the things that they sell, which come from large companies, you don't think that they might have a lot of diverse suppliers, but $1.4 billion in spend. And they're encouraging their tier one suppliers to buy over 800,000 from tier two diverse suppliers, and those numbers are going up year over year. So they recognize they do have a lot of tier one suppliers that are big companies, and they're pushing that down to them. This is a non-government company, private, public company, but not government contracting at all. And they're pushing their goals down to their tier one suppliers, who you can assume are pushing them down to their tier two suppliers as well. So a lot of good activity here. In a UPS survey, 52% of the people that responded to the survey said they want to work for a company with supplier diversity and inclusion programs. So they found out, UPS found out that this is something that their potential hires felt was important. So when they found out 52% of the survey responders want to work with a company like that, now they're letting their companies know, their potential candidates know about their company programs. So this is now in their literature, this is now in their recruiting process. This is now one of those things that come work for us because we do this, 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 and this. And guess what? We have supplier diversity programs, and we're spending more and more money with that. Coke found that people that were aware of their supplier diversity initiatives were 45% more likely to perceive the whole brand as valuing diversity, with a 25% more favorable view of the company overall, and 49% more likely to use Coca-Cola products. Now, Coca-Cola focuses heavily on drinks, but they make a lot of different things. We all know about Coke and Diet Coke and Coke Zero, but they make energy drinks. They make the Minute Maid drinks. They make some different waters. So just because people are aware that Coke does a lot with supplier diversity, that makes them value the brand more and see the brand in a more favorable light as they value diversity, and 49% more likely to choose a Coke product. So it translates to the bottom line in sales and value to the brand, which Coke is one of the most, if not the most recognizable brand on the planet. And for them to have people using more of their products and valuing them because they are seen as valuing diversity, that's a huge uptick for them. And they're good to begin with. The people that did the survey, they were a neutral company that managed this survey. They estimated that that meant 670,000 more consumers using Coke products that much more often. So that's a large number, and that translates again directly to the bottom line, to your sales and to your brand recognition. So this is a very important thing for companies to do. If you don't have a supplier diversity program, then you should really look into getting one. This is a big deal. Millennials and Gen Zers, we know that those two generations, and they're now blending a lot, are more likely to buy from customers with supplier diversity programs, and they're more likely, and they are very discriminating in what they buy. And the purchasing power of racial minorities nowadays is expected to exceed $3 trillion by the year 2030. So that's in 9 years, and that purchasing power is doing nothing but increasing year over year. Between the Gen Zers and the millennials, more and more discriminating consumers in that area, and they want to help the economy, help the world, help the planet. So this is a very significant and simple way to invest in all of these things through supplier diversity programs. So these are great ways to do that. And if you need help, if you need more information about that, I'm here to help. I'm here to help you understand what it would take to put that program in place and administer that. I have a certified I have a CPSD, which means I'm certified professional with supplier diversity, and I highly value this as a personal um, passion of mine as well. So that's what I have for today. Dynamic Dialogues coming up. We're going to talk about where are all the chips in about 3 weeks. We're going to have a little extra week this time because we're going to do April 13th, which is the second uh, Tuesday, but we have an extra one in there because March is a long month with 5 Tuesdays. On the 27th of April, we're going to talk about China and global trade. We're hearing more and more about this. I'm gathering all kinds of information. I think this is going to be a really good session. 5/11, I'm going to talk about soft skills for supply chain professionals. I've done some previous webinars on some different skills. I even did one on Microsoft skills. This one is going to be soft skills. And then 5/25, this is a word I keep hearing more and more about in regards to supply chains, and that is resilience. How do you become resilient? How do you stay resilient? What does that mean for your supply chain? So you can check out our events on our website. Again, if you're interested in more discussion about supplier diversity, this is a particular passion of mine. I also have a certification in that. You can always schedule a call with me, callwithjane.com. That'll take you to my calendar and you can set up a time to talk. So we can talk about how Purple Link and I can make your business better, because there's so many ways to reduce cost and risk, and there's better ways than you're using today. Just a reminder, our exam number 2 preparation begins next week, March 29th. So if you want to get a certification, or if you have people in your organization who would like to get certifications by the end of the year, there is ample time, but you need to start soon because it takes a while to go through the training and then take the test. And there's 3 tests that you have to take to be a CPSM. So it's a great goal for 2021, especially after 2020 and all the chaos. This is a great way to add to your skills to be prepared for the ever increasing amount of potential for jobs in supply chain. Um, so I have a question. It says, how much more are Gen Zers willing to pay for products and services that are more diverse? The statistic I have on that says that 75% of Gen Zers and millennials are willing to pay more when they perceive that that product, or they can see that that product comes from a small or diverse business. So I don't know how much more, but 75% of them say they are willing to pay every time more money for those. So I don't know if that actually bears out, but if 75% say that, it's probably, even if half of that actually comes out, that's over 35%. And that's a big number. And that's a big potential for companies who are smaller, who have these programs, to advertise that and at least be on parity with, if not have that as the defining factor, that and people will pay actually a little more for those types of products. So I'm going to leave you with this one slide. Sir Timothy John Berners-Lee is Sir Timothy. He's an English computer scientist. You might have heard of him, and you might not have, but you use him all the time. He's the best known as the inventor of the World Wide Web. In March of '89, he proposed an information management system when he was working on the CERN computer in Switzerland. He then implemented the first successful communication between what we call HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, servers and the internet. And he did that in about November of 1989. He's a professional fellow of computer science at Oxford and a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So he says we need diversity of thought in the world to face the new challenges. When asked about inventing the internet, he says that creating that was really an act of desperation because the situation without it was very difficult when I was working at the CERN site. Most of the technology involved in the web, like hypertext, like the internet, had all been designed, but I had to put them together. It was a step of generalizing, going to a higher level of abstraction, thinking about all the documentation systems out there as being possibly part of a larger imaginary documentation system. So I think we need to think about that with small and diverse businesses. Bring them in. They're possibly part of a larger system that's going to be way more powerful than we ever thought. And I have a final question. If they're only willing to pay less than 10% more, that's not much. If they're willing to pay more at all, that might mean the fact that they buy it versus don't buy it. And that could be a very positive thing to your business. If they're willing to pay, depending on what it is, 10% is a lot or not. If it's $19.99, an extra $2, that might be willing on that. Maybe it doesn't take that much. If you have things that are smaller, probably less than 10% would be that. If you have things that are $1,000, are you going to pay an extra $100 on that $1,000? Depending on what it is and how you buy it, it might. I think consumers, for me to project what consumers do and how they think is probably way out of my field of expertise. But I think it's important to consider that for everybody. So remember Tim Berners-Lee, Sir Timothy John Berners-Lee, and creating the internet that we all use and rely on. And again, think of taking what's already there, because that's what he did. He didn't really invent anything. What he did is he put them together in a way that allowed that synergy. And that's what I encourage you all to do. So with that, I'm finished. If there's other questions, comments, I'm happy to take that. I'm going to stop the